podcast YouTube page. I'm Justin Horniker. Today we're going to respond and to react to the World Half Marathon Championships that took place about 12 hours ago, halfway across the world in Poland from me. I wanted to take some time today to really digest these results and really spend some time just thinking about the overarching narrative instead of just reacting from this all on that surface level. We saw two fantastic races on both the men's and women's side. We saw fast times, ran two completely different styles. We saw really competitive races. We saw the shoe wars evening out for the better. And while we can talk about that, there's also the overarching narrative of should this half marathon championships have even taken place in the first place. We had the Canadian and American teams being held back. We have record numbers of COVID cases in Poland currently, and we'll kind of talk about that at the end, just to kind of sum it all up, bring it all full circle with what the year 2020 has meant to the sport of track field, to the sport of running, to the road racing as we know it. So to the races. I watched these races, like I said, when I woke up, because funny story, I tried to stay up last night so I could watch it at 4 a.m. my time here in Kansas City, Missouri, and I did not make it. I made it to about 3 and crashed on the couch. That being said, watching back this race, I liked having the time to kind of absorb, and I successfully didn't get caught up in the spoilers, which I'm really happy about. But having that time to kind of like watch at my own pace, be able to pause and kind of respond without having to worry about am I catching it live was kind of fun, and I think I really picked up on more of this race than I usually did. That being said, from the get-go, this race was off. We had about a 13-person lead pack about 2 minutes into the race, and you really saw like Jepchirchir, Jocelyn Jepchirchir, Yosemite Khan, and the returning champion, Natsanet Gadeta, who had a little bit of a nasty occurrence later on in the race, really take off. And what you saw were the two Kenyan contingents of Jepchirchir and Jepchirchir really taking up most of the work and wanting everyone and anyone to come hop on the train, but no one was taking up on it. You saw multiple occurrences of the universal symbol of, hey, come take over the work. I'm tired of leading the charge. These kind of symbols and like this kind of symbol. You saw that every K probably from Jepchirchir and Jepchirchir, but they took to the front and they took it admirably. And what Jepchirchir was able to do, kind of skirting danger later on in the race, because of her positioning and being able to stay out of the way. And what we really saw, this was more of a, as my Slack alerts go off, this was more of a war of attrition of all of these races were going out at women's only record pace, and at this kind of fast clip. It really led to some entertaining races, and this one going down to the wire with all the turns that you saw along the course and with a little bit of a damp course, it was pretty exciting. One thing about the course and having those like 5K loops, I think added some intrigue because you got to kind of have this state of reference every time they went around. So on that third loop, when I believe it was, I forget if it was Gadeta or Ymir, we're kind of going around the curve when they go along the kind of beachfront. And I think the curve, it's a downhill curve, and it's a little bit wet from just being a little bit windy that day. Maybe the ground was a little bit slick. And I think that's where you see the kind of negative aspect of these super shoes, that they don't have a lot of traction on those turns, and especially on a wet surface. And I think that's what led to this. She kind of fell on her stride all alone, was able to get back up. That was when Gadeta fell. And she was able to get back up, but she had maybe 20 seconds to make up, and she made that up over time, but you could definitely see that took it out of her. And as the defending World Half Marathon champs, that was a hard one to take. And I think it's mainly because of the conditions. So because of that, that was fall number 1. Fall number 2 saw Yasane and Jepchirchir. It's hard to tell what happened here because they were both kind of against the rail, and I'll kind of post a screenshot of them getting back up here. But they're both against the rail, and it looked like, I mean, really when you're looking at it, it looked like Yasane kind of clipped herself, like moving away from where Jepchirchir was. And the commentators are saying that Jepchirchir clipped her on her heel, and to me it looked like she clipped herself, but was kind of responding to Jepchirchir trying to get some more room off the rail. It's hard to say, and this is maybe the one time in the history of road racing that the shoe cam was actually appreciated, because you can kind of see everything that was going on, but it was hard to see like whose foot hit whose. Anyway, they both get down, and this is where Jepchirchir is able to kind of use a little L7 hurdle form and get over them. This is where the German Malat Yasakijeta is able to kind of go around them and kind of sidestep them and stay out of danger. And that's where, when you realize that Kijeta was in the lead pack and she'd been there the whole time, she just kind of tucked away behind all the big players and staying out of danger. And then you see the final little sprint as they're kind of turning onto the final little beach segment, and they're on those blue pads, and you see Yuhulal kind of slip a little bit and almost looked like she just kind of rolled her ankle at the finish. And that's when Jepchirchir really made that move to take off and win 105.16. That's the women's only world record. That's a world championships record. You saw all 3 women that finished on the podium spot going under that women only record, and it's fantastic. And I think what we finally have is competitive balance with the Adidas shoe coming out, with the Asics shoe getting better, with the Saucony shoe getting better, and you actually see all 6 podium finishers. You had 3 Nike shoes, 3 Adidas shoes. I think it finally goes to the fact that competitive balance is there. Now it's actually racing, and I think when you have those faster times, the stakes are a little bit higher. It's a little bit harder to make those moves when you're rolling like that, and it just makes for these exciting races. So the women's race was off from the get-go, and what you ended up having was Paris Jepchirchir setting that women's only world record. Then you had Kijeta and Yuhulal coming up right behind them, and Ethiopia and the team score eventually takes it, but it was really close, 12-16, the Ethiopians versus the Kenyans. Okay, so moving on to the men's race now. And the men's race was a completely different animal, because I tell you, the women's race had me intrigued from the get-go. There's so much going on, so much back and forth. You had Jepchirchir and Jepchirchir really taking the race by storm and kind of challenging people to come up and challenge them. And then you had kind of the added intrigue of Khan being up there as well and seeing where she was going to finish. Versus the men's race that had about a 40-person pack like halfway through the race, right? And it wasn't until the final 5K that lead pack really took off, led by Kiplimo, led by Cheptegei. And they were pretty apt of just kind of letting that pedestrian pace go, especially that first 5K. And just each 5K was faster than the last. So they kind of go out real championship style racing that you kind of talk about. But the difference being here that they went out with that pedestrian 5K pace. And I think it helped a lot of just fast times down the table, because no one's trying to go out too fast and really hurt themselves. I mean, the only person that really finished kind of further down than you thought they were going to was Julian Vonders, who took the lead like early and wasn't able to hold on, wasn't able to really make too big of an impact, because the Ugandan, Kenyans, and Ethiopians, especially with Kiplimo and Cheptegei being there and kind of dictating the race, weren't going to go with them. So really, you get your screen time, but then, it doesn't happen for you from there. And we saw national records being broken left and right. Like Jake Smith down at 18th broke the British half marathon record. And we saw a course record, world championship record being broken. And really this race came down to, it was fun to watch just from the intrigue of what is Cheptegei going to do with Kiplimo being up there and just being such a freaking talent. But this race wasn't really made until that 5K mark, and that's where you saw Jepchirchir starting to fade a little bit when Egan passed him. He wasn't able to go with him and just kind of conceded that fourth place, it seemed like. And like, this is his first half marathon. He used the 5K and 10K world record holder now. Not really training as his goal race, but obviously that dude is fit and goes and runs 59:21 for your first half marathon. Not bad. This course was fast. It was chilly weather. It was a little bit damp, which is why we saw some of the slips and falls that we saw. But just looking at the overall intrigue of the race, you end up with Kiplimo being able to outduel Kiplimo Candy and Omniwork Willow Gwyn towards the end of the race. And really you saw what is probably the golden age of Ugandan's distance running, with Jepchirchir coming in 4th. You have Kiplimo in 16th. They don't knock off Kenya and Ethiopia, but this is probably the closest that Uganda is ever going to get. And with Kiplimo only being 19 years old, what were you doing as a 19-year-old, by the way? Kiplimo's out here setting the course record at the World Half Marathon Championships in his first ever half marathon. And it'll be interesting to see what he ends up doing, because obviously the money's on the roads. You gotta wonder if he is ready to make that jump up with an Olympic year coming up, if he wants to stay in the 10K, especially with Jepchirchir as a training partner, and you wonder if they're going to try to kind of have that dual threat, or you wonder if he's going to make that step up to the marathon nice and early. And it's not saying that. It's not a do or die decision. He's only 19. He can go in the 5K and 10K next year and then hop up into the marathon after that. It'll be interesting to see what Jepchirchir does as well, with those two being training partners, and the joy that you saw on Jepchirchir's face after he crossed the line, saw that Kiplimo won, and just gave him a hug and like lifted him up. It was such a fantastic sight to see, and you just get this like sense that those two love training together, love racing together, and just love the entire process. So race-wise, totally impressive. This was such a day, as easy as that sounds. This was such a, both the races were fantastic. Sometimes with the championship races, you have those like slow, methodical, nothing happens until the last K, and both races didn't really have that. As much as the men's race up until the halfway point was kind of a methodical race, you still had Kiplimo and Jepchirchir, and the favorites that you thought were going to be the favorites were up there and pushing the pace. And then you saw lap after lap, they're cranking it down K after K, and eventually the race became a race, and it's so exciting, so fun, especially to see someone like Kiplimo be able to pull it out. And when we talk about who is going to be the person to challenge Kipchoge's marathon world record, a lot of times two names come up: Rodnix Kiprodo and now Kiplimo. And yeah, that's going to be exciting for years to come, because they're both 19, 20, coming into their prime. They still have a long way to go until they get there. They have a long career ahead of them, if the careers of Kipchoge and Bekele are anything to look forward to. We have a long time watching those two make noise in the world distance scene. Now, something to pay attention to end on a little bit of a downer note, is what happens from the COVID standpoint going forward. This is a race that you can question, should it have happened with Poland having 2 back-to-back days of record high COVID cases. Now, it's a closed course. There weren't a ton of fans there, but there were fans on the course, which, can kind of say something too. But do we deserve races like this right now? And some of that's coming from the lens of someone living in Kansas City, Missouri, that is currently seeing record cases to where our hospital couldn't take in everyone yesterday. That was reported today. So some of it's coming from that lens, and knowing that elsewhere in the world, record high numbers are still on that flattened curve and are still manageable, but it really makes you hope that you don't see anything in the next couple weeks that kind of stem from this race. Now, from the protocol standpoint, if there aren't any COVID cases that come from this race, if they were able to prove that it's financially feasible if they're able to prove that the bubble is not going to spread COVID, is not going to cause distress to the athletes, it's a little bit of a science experiment, and it kind of sucks that you're saying that. It's a science experiment with these 20 to 40-year-old athletes in the prime of their career. There's a ton of money at stake, and potentially you're kind of experimenting with this bubble protocol on them. But if it does succeed, then I think that paints a better picture of what 2021 will look like. And we've seen it successfully done here in the US with the Music City Distance Carnival, things like that. We're going to see the Marathon Project in early December that's going to be run similar to this, where everyone's going to have negative COVID tests, they enter the bubble. We've seen it done. It's old news at this point, but you wonder if the cross the world travel adds another little wrinkle to something like the World Athletics Championships. Anyway, that's ending on a downer note. A little bit of upper note. We saw 2 records go down today. We've seen world records go down all across the year. 2020 might be the most intriguing year of racing, especially when you consider this year is still a disaster. We saw, from what we saw earlier in the year, which was like virtual racing, and you saw like the Garden Games, and when we had the Oregon Track Club versus Atlanta Track Club, like virtual racing, and now to the early Diamond League, to these races, and to actually see like intriguing races on top of like actual competition, leaves you feeling pretty good. As a track and field, as a running fan, like this is probably the most I've really been tuned in to a racing circuit in a while. Now we'll have a little bit of downtime. We'll have the Marathon Project and a California track meet in early December, so that gives us something to look forward to. A lot of people have kind of packed it up and started focusing on 2021. That's why Sifan Hassan wasn't in this race. And this is a time to kind of plug my Patreon as I bump my new mic stand. I reported last week, I have kind of the insights into Sifan Hassan and Yomif Kejelcha's camp, that they are, shutting it down, focusing on 2021. They took a bite at the apple last week. Didn't quite go how they wanted it to, especially in Kejelcha's case and in Hassan's case, because she was shooting for the world record. So shut it down, focus on 2021. That's why you didn't see Hassan at the Marathon Championships. I know like Mo Farah is kind of in that same camp of take one bite at the apple and see where it goes. That's why you didn't see Mo Farah at this World Marathon Champions, to the dismay of Joshua Cheptegei. But it gives a lot of intrigue going forward. So let me know, what did you think of the World Marathon Championships? Leave your comments down below. Were you expecting a course record? Were you expecting a women's only record being won? Comment below what you were doing at 19 years of age. And we'll go from there. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like my analysis, if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. Let me know that this is worthwhile. And happy running, guys. We'll talk soon.